On today's episode of Altered Life, we're going to talk about transformation and trust. Join us as your host, Michael Castanon, interviews Dean Fitch and his mentor, Brian Samford. Dean is a licensed marriage and family therapist. He is the co-founder of Avea Solutions and principal at Kipu Health. Brian is also a licensed marriage and family therapist and is the chief of program development at the Arbor Behavioral Health. Many years ago, after a chance encounter, Brian became Dean's mentor, and the two of them began a relationship that was more than just a human connection.
We're really fortunate to have a friendship like this.
It was a relationship where transformation could take place because mutual trust had been established.
The fact that I could tell that he was there with me in that moment, and he cared about me. I could just feel that.
Wow.
In today's world, can trust be more than an afterthought? Can love be at the center of treatment in an industry where we're taught to have professional distance? Find out all this and more on today's episode of Altered Life.
People are lonely and disconnected.
Yeah.
But there's a belief that I have that, and of course it's more complex, but there's a belief that I have, a basic belief that people have at their core the need to belong, a need to connect. We're relational.
Do you know what is at the opposite end of the continuum from connection? Addiction. Because the nature of addiction is we're completely isolated within ourselves. And so we can't get any of our needs met, because the way that we get our needs met is reaching out and connecting with other humans.
Okay, well, you guys, here we are. The three of us getting ready to have a conversation. We're talking about the power of human connection. Dean, I want to thank you for joining us. Brian, thank you for joining us through the virtual line out there. And I'm really excited about having you guys here, really to share your stories individually, but really more importantly, like hear your story about the relationship you all have had with each other. And I admire both of you. I've been able to get to know Dean pretty well now at this point. And Brian, I'm learning more about you. But what's exciting to me, Brian, is that here's this man sitting next to me that I admire. And I asked him, hey, do you have anybody in your life that has impacted you in a positive, transformative way? And he said, I absolutely do. I said, well, tell me, who is that person?
Yeah.
And you said who?
That was an easy answer for me.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Brian is at the top of that list.
Wow.
I mean, I'm going to take my wife and my kids aside, but talking about a peer, talking about a colleague, talking about a friend, it's been profound, the impact that he's had on my life.
Wow. That's amazing. So we're going to get into that here in a little bit. But before we do, I want each of you to sort of introduce yourself in a way that you want the world out there to know. Like, who are you today? Not your story, but today as you were sitting here. What would you like the audience to know about you? Dean, can you start off?
Sure. Well, I'm a grateful person sitting here today.
Awesome.
To be in the good company. I'm a father of 3. I'm a grandfather
awesome.
of 2. And tomorrow, as I've mentioned, is my wife and I celebrate our 32nd anniversary.
Congratulations.
So very thankful for my family and those in my life. My work life is amazing. Working in the industry of helping others and being a part of that has been a big part of my life for a long time and continues to be today.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And Brian, what would you like the audience to know about you?
I guess the thing that I'm most proud of in my life is probably the fact that I'm in recovery. And I've been in recovery for a long time. I've worked in treatment and mental health for 32 years. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and licensed chemical dependency counselor. And it has been a just glorious journey being in a position where I can potentially be helpful to other people. So, and I'm extremely grateful for it.
That's wonderful. Let's talk about that. So you are in this position now where you're able to help people and do it in a meaningful way, and a way that is obviously important to you. I can see it. Even the way you communicate about it, it comes across right away that this work that you're doing is really important. Oh, how did you get to this place? Like, tell me the Reader's Digest version of the journey to get you to this place where you are today.
Well, the reason that a lot of times when I introduce myself, I don't necessarily say I'm in recovery, but I knew this question was coming, so I might as well go ahead and put it out there. I was one of those, like many of us that work in treatment. I was one of those people that, I went to treatment and I didn't know anything about recovery. And the first counselor that I had, I was just so amazed with him because this person didn't know me and he just seemed like he really cared. And I just couldn't get over that. Why does this stranger care about me?
Yeah.
And I made a decision right then and there that I wanted to be like him when I grew up. And that really started me on this journey of becoming, a therapist, was because of my initial interaction with him. If I could give half of what he gave me, then it would be a success. So
I don't want to miss this opportunity. You're getting right into what this podcast is all about, the power of human connection. You just said that you had a counselor when you were in treatment that just made you feel like he genuinely cared for you, and it altered your life's path. Can you talk more about that? Like, what did that look like, and how meaningful was that for you?
Well, because at that time, life was scary. People were scary. You can't trust anyone. And this individual, he just, he sat down with me, and it wasn't that he necessarily said anything specific. I mean, he was, giving me a lot of recovery jargon, but it was the fact that I could tell that he was there with me in that moment, and he cared about me. I could just feel that from him.
Wow.
And, based on where I was coming from, it was like I had been in the desert for, forever, and someone offered me a drink of water. And in that experience that I had with him, it was so profound. And it really did lead me on this journey. And that was the moment that I made a decision that I wanted to do what he was doing.
You're just unpacking, putting your finger, describing the essence of why this topic of human connection is so powerful. Dean,
can I say one other thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. It has taken me some time in my journey as a therapist to reach this point. And really what he was doing in that moment is he loved me.
Yes.
And that's what happened. And that's what I responded to, was this fact that this stranger just unconditionally loved me for just being another human. And that is ultimately what I think the greatest thing you can do for a client that's sitting in front of you is just love them.
Thank you for that, Brian. I couldn't agree more. I think that since you're leading us down this path, I think that what I'm seeing in the space of treatment and therapy is a move to try to help us all move it from like an insipid process to a more inspirational way of connecting and being. it is, the word love is almost taboo in some places.
We shouldn't think that's unconventional to hear
Yeah.
a seasoned, well-educated
Right.
clinician use the word love, because we've been trained to have professional distance.
That's right.
Which doesn't mean that we don't love, but we certainly don't talk about it historically in our field. And I heard Brian present several years back in Dallas, Texas, to a group of professionals, and he shared this sentiment, and he got a chance to unpack it a bit more, and the room melted. And I wondered while I was sitting in the room, what's the response going to be? They melted, because we all know it's the right thing.
It is.
We're doing it for the right reason.
That's right. That's
he lives
right.
that.
Yeah. There's a organization just below us, and the name of the organization is Love Has No Limits. And what their mission is to go into communities that are struggling, that are having social difficulty and maybe high crime rates and high mental health rates. And they go into those cities and spread love. And it's amazing to see the impact just spreading love has on these communities. And so I think we're talking about something that is really important, that we should get comfortable with and start to be able to, discuss in a really natural way. So I'm glad you brought that up, Brian. Now, Dean, I also wanted to, talk to you about your journey before we talk about the intersection of your journeys here.
Sure.
So what led you to the place where you are today?
My story is different from Brian's, although I'll tell you, I'm still just thinking about Brian's story because, Brian, I'll tell you, I have seen you firsthand live out that promise you made to yourself with, I can't count the number of people. So you sure have been true to that commitment you made.
That's excellent.
It's been amazing to watch. I came from a place of being a youth and family minister from a very young age. 18, 19 years old, I got involved in the church. I got involved in working with young people and adolescents and kind of growing up in that environment, and then getting training, and then making a career in that for almost 2 decades.
Wow.
And during that process, I continued to learn more about caregiving and about people helping and about being involved in the community and being involved with families and couples and adolescents, and continued to get training to the point where I got a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. And when I got to the place of needing to get licensed, I needed a supervisor. I'll give you 3 guesses who I found to supervise me.
Yeah, who? I couldn't guess. Who?
Yeah. Brian and I happened to cross paths around that time. I was still a full-time youth and family minister, working with a really vibrant congregation in Texas, and also getting to work in therapy. Our church had a counseling center attached to the church, actively working with the community. And so I decided I really need to complete the journey of licensure, but I need a supervisor. They're not always easy to find, by the way. And then great ones are really hard to find. And I mean this when I say I met one of the best.
Explain how you met Brian again? So you chose Brian, but how did you get to Brian? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, we had a mutual friend that we were unaware of.
Okay.
Who was working at a treatment center as an executive.
Yep.
I just knew him from the community. I'd been living in a smaller community for a while and knew this individual. Kept inviting me to come out to the treatment center, come out and be involved. Knew I'd worked with young people, knew I had gotten my education and degree and had some skill. And I kept saying, I don't really want to work in that population. That's just not really where I see myself working. I'm really, focused on working with families and couples and adolescents, and that seems to be my giftedness. And so one day he said, hey, listen, how about instead of coming out to the treatment center, just come over to Vicky's Burgers and meet somebody. I'm excited. We just hired this PhD therapist who's going to be our clinical director and working actively with our family program.
And this is Brian. This is Brian.
I went to lunch, and long story short, Brian and I just sat and talked the entire time. There were several other people there. And Brian said, listen, do me a favor. Would you, Dean? Would you come out over the weekend and just watch as I do some presentations during the family program? Because I'd love your feedback, and I couldn't say no. At that time, I was still sort of fresh out of school and very focused on the theories and loved talking about all of that, the modalities. And so I said, sure, I'll do it. And little did I know what was going to happen. You know, I went out, believe it was a Friday afternoon for the first presentation. I sat in the back of a really full room. I was actually pretty astonished at the number of family members in that room. Brian was introduced, and he began to share and talk and do therapy with the families in very active manner. And I couldn't write notes fast enough. I couldn't capture everything I wanted to capture fast enough. And at some point I finally had to abandon even writing the notes. And I just said, just pay attention. And I was enamored. I mean, I was blown away. And it wasn't long after, keep me straight on this, Brian. Brian said, listen, come out and do some work. You need a few more hours. I'll supervise you. You'd be great out here. And the words just came out. It's almost like trying to say no to Michael Castanon. You can't do it. I said yes, and it was fantastic. Oh. And shortly thereafter, Brian got me involved in working in that very family program, and it was a transformative experience for me.
You know, listening to you, watching you talk about this episode, it's like I sense a switch was flipped, and the light went on. What was it about that? What was it that you were seeing that just charged you, that drew you to the work? What was it? I mean, obviously Brian, right? Brian's part of it, but I have a sense it was even much more than that, right? It was the work that was being done.
I had no concept of the impact that family therapy, that passion, that care, that engagement, that presence could make in that setting. I had this idea of what working in that population was like. I was completely wrong about that. And getting to experience that, and then now I was a little scared also.
Sure.
To be honest. I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into. I wasn't sure if I was up to the task. But that's, as Brian and I built a relationship. First, he was my mentor, my supervisor. That was the first way I knew and interacted with Brian. That was our first relationship. That one very quickly turned into a friendship, and one in which I was gaining a lot of information, learning a lot of not just technique and information, but really the passion that Brian just talked about a moment ago, and bringing that to bear with every client that you encounter at the treatment setting.
That's incredible. And Brian, I want to commend you for inviting Dean to come outside of his comfort zone into his uncomfort zone, right? And so you moved him, and look what happened. So I'd imagine you have seen that happen numerous times, but why did you invite this guy? What was it about him that sort of, what did you see that made you want to invite him outside of his comfort zone and into this opportunity?
Well, and actually I was having this conversation earlier today, because we were interviewing potential staff, and I could sit down with someone, and it's kind of like the same story with that counselor. Is I can sit down with someone, and it's all about the energy.
Yeah.
What energy do they put off?
Mm-hmm.
And Dean puts off just, first of all, he just kind of has this glow about him. And he just puts off this very positive, loving energy. And he's always been that way ever since I've known him. And, what he knows or doesn't know, I wasn't as concerned with that, because, if he needs some instruction or whatever, we can do that. But you can't teach that glow and that positivity and that comfort that he has about him. And so that's really what attracted me to him.
Wow.
And so, I wanted to bring him in as quick as I could.
Yeah.
Fortunately, he was able to do that.
Yeah. You saw that, that quality that you just is something that you can't define in hard skills. It's sort of like this soft skills that he has, this his personality, his spirit. It's almost a spirit, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just feel better when you're around Dean Fitch.
Hey guys, I can sit here all day long. Thank you.
I say, yeah. It's absolutely the truth. It's absolutely the truth. But I think though, Dean had to feel comfortable in your presence as well, to be take you up on your invitation. So what was it,
Michael,
about Brian?
I saw well, Brian's amazing. You can already tell just talking to him.
Yeah.
He's just so authentic, so transparent, so available and accessible and real. And Brian was like that way from the moment. And I felt very safe with Brian, despite feeling a little uncomfortable, unsure if I would be effective. Felt very safe with Brian, that he's not going to ask me to do something or put me in a situation, not going to throw me in to do a group before. He's going to, bring me along. But I also got to tell you, I saw an opportunity to grow. And I don't know, if I've really put that into words before, but like I saw an opportunity to learn from someone wonderful who had both, a lot of great knowledge, a lot of great experience, but also had that incredible sense of purpose. And you don't come across that every day.
Yes.
And I think I had the good fortune of recognizing like this is going to be this could very well be an important relationship in my life. Of course, it turned out to be a transformative relationship because Brian and I have gone on to have a long friendship and done some great things together as well in the space. So, thank you, Brian.
You mentioned
You're very welcome.
You mentioned so many things there, Dean. One of the things I want to talk about is this, like there's the invocation, there's this invitation to come, right? But you mentioned that you felt safe, and that's probably been a very common theme in your relationship with Brian. You probably have had this just deep trust and this ability to get vulnerable and to get real with Brian because you're safe, right?
Yeah.
How did that safe, trustworthy dynamic, how did that develop? How did that become?
Brian's had it because of the work that he's done in his own life. He has developed that safe presence, right? He also has, I hate that sometimes I'm hesitant to use the word integrity because I think a lot of people use it a lot, but there's an integrity that Brian has, and I'm not simply saying this, that Brian's not going to tell you just what you want to hear or what makes sense in the moment or what just gets you, past a hurdle. Brian's going to be thoughtful and Brian's going to be truthful. Now he's going to be, generally speaking, he's going to be kind about the delivery, but that's pretty hard to walk away from when you find that in a person.
Yeah.
When you find a person who's really grounded and has access to some wisdom and has passion and is also safe. Well, I'll tell you one of the things Brian helped me to do, and he probably doesn't realize it. I don't know that I've ever told him this before, is that I had some incongruence in my life. Of course, we all have some, but I had some incongruence. And I was the kind of guy that would always say, if you ask me, how you doing? I'm doing fantastic.
Really?
I'm wonderful. I'm great. You would almost never, even if I was having a terrible day, you'd almost never hear me say.
Which is almost a tell for you're not always doing great, right? That's almost.
Exactly. I started getting congruent. I started getting open to saying, I'm struggling, or this is difficult for me, or something's going on. As Brian and I developed, a close relationship and friendship. Hey, I'm having a tough time with, one of my kids, or, this is going on in my life. That stuff started happening where I wasn't really used to having that. I worked in another setting where I think I felt like people expected me to always be on and to always be up, which meant that I had to deal with everything else privately. Now that was probably not.
Yeah. You're not alone, but that's kind of how we're kind of pre-wired, even as men. We got three guys here, on this podcast right now, but we got that kind of tough exterior. We don't want to show our soft underbelly, right? So Brian helped you to come to a place where you could actually be more congruent, more authentic, and grow from that.
You can't be a great therapist without it. You can't be a really effective therapist is what I mean.
That's good.
You can't be an effective therapist when you haven't done that work.
Yeah.
And Brian, I don't know if I've never told you about that, have I?
No. Never.
As he and I built a relationship and built a friendship and then a business partner, all the things that we've done.
Yeah.
That became something that, I was able to grow in, and it was very freeing for me, and it opened me up to
liberating,
a lot of learning and growing and being more available.
Wow.
In all my relationships, quite frankly.
Yeah. It's so nice to hear that. And I think one thing that you said that I want to talk to Brian about is you saw in Brian this he had a purpose sort of driven perspective. He was living life on purpose. He was purposeful, and you could really unpack that word in and of itself. So, Brian, like, how did you get to this place of being purposeful? How'd you come to that place?
Well, I've got this other. Can I share this other story?
Sure.
I need to share this other story first, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So with Dean, and the connection with Dean is, we were friends, right? And I respected him. We did things together, but there was a moment in time that occurred that was tremendously profound for me. Is I was in a real difficult situation, and I'm not going to get necessarily in the specifics of that situation, but it was one of the most difficult times in my entire life. And I remember it very vividly. I was sitting in my living room on the floor in front of the TV, and it was like I was being sucked down this dark hole, and I could not get out. And I was just getting lost, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know. I was just almost paralyzed by this situation that was happening. And at the darkest moment of that, all of a sudden the phone rang. And it was Dean. And it was this random, I didn't call him and tell him I was having a hard time, or he just called me in that moment. And it was like someone, threw a lifeline down to me and pulled me out of that hole. And just by talking with him and sharing what was going on in that situation, it pulled me out of that. That's the darkest point that I've had in my recovery. I wasn't thinking about using or anything. I was just lost. And he pulled me out of that. And so when that occurred, it really transformed my relationship with Dean. So he positioned himself in that moment as a mentor to me. And as, you talk to, anybody that's in long-term sobriety, they'll tell you that they have one or two or, a handful of people that are very critical for their sobriety. And that's the position that Dean has with me. He is my safe person in the world that I can reach out to when I'm struggling with something or I need some help. And, I've got another friend too, and Dean and this other friend are the most significant people in my life, more so than my family. Mm-hmm. And so, that's when that relationship transformed for me as a friendship to something that was way more than a friendship.
Well beyond that. And it's amazing where it starts off where you think, well, he's going to help me, right? Dean, you're looking for the guidance, right? And Brian's going to get me down this path that I think, that you're feeling called to, you're feeling passionate about. But down the road, it's reversing itself. It's turning itself on its head. And we don't get to make that determination. We actually don't get to drive that. We don't get to script that. It just happens as it happens. It's crazy when you think about that.
Not everybody that works together in a professional setting, even though they may have respect and they may be colleagues and friends, not everybody is going to have, turn into a lifelong friendship with deep trust and respect. Because I would say the same thing about Brian. We're really fortunate to have a friendship like this. But I will say this. There's always an opportunity, whether it's in our workplace, whether it's in our neighborhood, wherever we may be, to build a relationship where you make an impact. And one of the things
Wonderful.
I am trying to coach myself in right now is to say, Dean, slow down. Slow down. There's people around, whoever it may be, wherever you are, that may need a touch, that may need a little more time, that may need an investment. Because plenty of people have invested in me. Plenty of people. Brian, top of the list, but many people have stopped and taken time and seen me and listened to me and helped me. I really know that, especially now in this nation and the things that we're going through and the things that we've just been through, there's an epidemic of loneliness. There's an epidemic of being detached and disconnected.
Isolation. Yeah.
My call to action is let's slow down a little bit and make sure that we see people and take time, because these relationships can develop.
That's right.
Although they not always will.
That's right. And we're doing that right now.
Yeah.
We're actually spreading that word right now. And we're showing, like, we're modeling it right now. What's happening here, it's, we're opening up. Like, this is not, always comfortable. You guys are getting real and sharing stuff. And, Brian, what a powerful story, that you shared about that moment and that call coming in just at that right time. That call just came in. And wow, it's just mind blowing when you hear about those things that happen, and you could be there for Brian. But I want to go back to you, Brian, about this thing of purpose. It is really important, and I see it in you. And I've had interaction with you in the past, and I see, like, in our conversations, you're thoughtful. You're kind of just purposeful in general, even in this conversation.
Yeah.
You can see it, right? Like, really thoughtful, purposeful. So, like, we want to know more about what it means to, living more purposefully. Can you help us with that?
Well, for me, it's not that complicated. It's, I drank the Kool-Aid early on, and the Kool-Aid is as a recovering person, you're on a mission. And the mission is stay sober and to help other people. And that's it. And so, and that's what I want to do is I want to be of service. Part of it is, I don't beat myself up, and I don't carry guilt and shame anymore. I've worked through all that. But, when I was using, I did a lot of damage, and I took a lot from people. And part of making amends for that is the payback, is to give back. And that's what I really try to stay focused on. And, on this journey that I've been on, there's been so many people that have gone so far above and beyond in helping me that I want to do the same for other people.
It's beautiful, Brian.
And help them.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It makes a ton of sense. It's simple, but powerful. And I think these concepts we're talking about, some that are in recovery, it may be easier for those who are in recovery to actually grasp these concepts, believe it or not. It's those who are not from that walk of life. How do we help them grasp that concept of connection and taking counteraction? If you're prone to isolation, moving outside of that's a comfort zone. You just are comfortably isolated. It turns into something usually where it's harming, right? Harmful. So how could we help those who maybe are outside of that world and understand this concept as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, do you think there's any correlation between the epidemic of loneliness that's taking place in the nation, which is a fact, and the challenges that we're facing across the nation with addiction and mental health?
100%.
So loneliness, I'm not saying it's a one-to-one.
Yeah.
People are lonely and disconnected.
Yeah.
But there's a belief that I have that, and of course it's more complex, but there's a belief that I have, a basic belief that people have at their core the need to belong, a need to connect. We're relational. And there's variance. Some people do better with more time by themselves. Others, need to be with But generally speaking, I approach most people with the conviction that, most people want to have a healthy, positive connection with other human beings, and it's meaningful to us, and it impacts our well-being and our mental health, right? So that's what I'm saying is like I'm talking to myself here.
Yeah.
Be generous with giving that to other people. It doesn't cost much but time.
Yeah.
Be generous with the simple outreach. Be thoughtful about that. Be respectful about that. But don't underestimate how profound that human connection is, even if it's a simple one. I had a conversation with my mailman recently in which I left the conversation going, wow, that was really a positive conversation. And I really feel motivated and inspired by just visiting with him for a little bit. And I also left with a feeling like it felt like he doesn't get to talk to people much. I just got that little feeling.
Yes, right. Those who are providing help to others, those who are providing therapy to those that are deeply wounded and are in a point of desperation. Like, can you each speak to the fact of, from a clinical perspective, because I don't think that the world knows out there, from clinically speaking, Brian, why is this thing of human connection so important? Why is that as a clinician? Put on your clinical hat and unpack that for us, will you?
Well, so the question is why is this connection so important?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I present, and I talk a lot about this, is, do you know what is at the opposite end of the continuum from connection? Addiction.
Yeah.
Because the nature of addiction is we're completely isolated within ourselves. And so we can't get any of our needs met, because the way that we get our needs met is reaching out and connecting with other humans. And when I'm completely shut off from that, I'm in this tremendous amount of pain, and I'm going to have to try to medicate it with something. So connection is the solution to that. And I don't know, I'm sure you feel this way too, experience this. The older I get, the more significant connection becomes.
Yes.
Because, at the end of the day, or at the end of a life, you're not going to look back and think, I wish I'd have worked more, or I wish I'd have done.
That's
you're going to
true.
look back and you're going to say, I wish I would have spent more time with family and friends.
True.
In that connection, because that's what adds actual meaning to life, is when you have those moments of true connection with another person. That's the significance. That's where the beauty occurs.
Thank you for sharing that, Dean.
How do you follow that?
Yeah,
healing is interpersonal as much as intrapersonal. There's a psalm in the Old Testament that says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another."
Yes,
there's just a reference to the fact that human connection, when it's healthy, helps us to be better.
Yeah,
and we know that we both come from a kind of a family therapy background. We know our family histories and our family of origin, and we look back 2 and 3 generations sometimes to see the impact, both good and challenging, that we experience in those closest first relationships. We know that first relationship with our caregivers, our parents, our siblings, that those have a big impact and imprint on how we see ourselves, how we function in the world, the messages that we internalize, and then how we go out from those early experiences and teach other people about how to treat us or what we believe about ourselves. And so whether it's those first early relationships or profound relationships along the way, those are where there's powerful moments for vulnerability, right?
Yes.
It's in transaction between human beings that vulnerability becomes something operable and creating the change.
Yes.
And so I like the way Brian says things because they're simple and they ring true. It takes me more words to try to get at it, but humans have the power to help heal. We also have the power to injure if we're not careful. So we bear a responsibility in the way that we interact with one another.
Yeah.
And I love the I love the dynamic and you know, the nature of the human world, the human condition, where we're not all the same, right? There's a lot of different colors, a lot of different shades, a lot of different personality types. It's rich. And so Brian has his way of speaking, and that resonates with another person seeking connection. And then you have your way of speaking, and that resonates more with another person seeking connection. It's kind of crazy that way, how that works. You know, the conversation we're having is just so powerful. I think, you know, the connection, I was looking about connection and thinking about, you know, organisms and how you know, the tallest living things on the planet are redwood trees. And I was reading about the redwood trees. You know, their root system doesn't go very deep. They're 300 feet high, 30 feet wide. Do you know how they get so tall? Their root systems are interconnected with the other trees. That's what makes them go so high.
Wow.
Right? And if you think about early experiences in life, right? When Brian was saying the opposite of connection is addiction. Is that correct? That's on the other...
Addiction, mental health problems, pain.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it on the journey of life, right? As you get older, you want more of that connection. I think on the front end of life too, we want that connection too. But what happens on that front end, quite often for many of us, is a lot of disconnection.
Yeah.
And then what's coming out of that disconnection, and you guys are seeing that, you're working with so many people. Let's talk a little bit about that. What are you seeing when people are coming from that? You know, they're being informed, they're being nurtured without the nurturing. You know, it's this disconnection, and what's that breeding in society or in people's lives?
Well, it's age old, right? Closeness and distance, and how we manage that. We were chatting earlier, so I was thinking about porcupines.
Yeah.
You ever hear the parable about the porcupines?
No.
Brian, and it's in the winter, and the porcupine community gets really cold, right? So they come this is from Schopenhauer, by the way, not Dean Fitch. They get real close to each other, but their quills, you know, spike each other. And so it hurts to get close to get warm. So they back up again, right? And so as it gets colder, they get closer again. They poke each other, and so they back up, and so eventually they find out that they can get about this close before it gets uncomfortable. So they get as close as they can to get a little bit of warmth without hurting each other. And it's a little bit of a challenging parable for saying we have a tough time sometimes as human beings.
Yeah.
We need that warmth.
Yes.
That healing, that connection, that encouragement, that challenge that comes from getting close to other people. But our experiences tell us that not everyone is safe to get too close with, right? Some behaviors are irritating, some are offensive, some are damaging.
Yeah.
And so we have to try to figure out, how do we get this need met? Can we get just close enough? Can we get really close? How close can we get? And that's that closeness and distance that we're always trying to figure out. So the healthier that we build families, the healthier that we build communities, and anywhere people group, then we're kind of back to safety again. A safe place to have and to provide the needs that we have together, and they're common.
Yeah,
they're common needs.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I answered the question, but I did.
No, I think you did. I think you did. I think you did. I think the other thing it came to me when you were answering the question is more. Sometimes I don't think we're aware as well as to the disconnection we're sowing. Inside of our own families, inside of our own children, right? Inside of these units that are designed for development. And I don't think that it's just a lack of awareness. Don't you, Brian? I mean, I don't think people are intentionally trying to sow disconnection, but it's happening, and it's happening pretty dramatically here in society today. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the technology advancements have really impacted, I think, connection. The because we don't live the way that we used to.
Mhm.
You know, we used to spend a lot of time in person together. And now, you know, a lot of people spend time together, but they're, you know, over the internet or texting or, you know, one of the things, I have a 20-year-old and, you know, 20-year-olds communicate through texting or Instagram or, and so,
Yeah.
and so, you know, which is very different than, you know, 30 years ago where people actually talk to each other.
Yeah.
And so what I like to do with him is when he texts me, because he's texting me because he doesn't really want to talk to me.
Right.
You call him.
I always call him.
That's nice. Good job, Dad. Good job, Dad. That's good. That's good.
So
Yeah.
I do that.
Yeah.
I actually do that to a lot more people than just him.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I do the same thing. Yeah. I do the same thing. Yeah.
And so and as you know, society has lost the ability to a degree, to have that connection, to be able to communicate face to face and spend actual physical time with each other. And so that's one of the things that at our treatment center is we take their phones from them when they come in, and they have to. I mean, they're at our facility for an extended period of time without their phones, and we get a lot of feedback from clients that it was such a kind of really positive experience because it put them in a position where they had to actually communicate and be present with people. So that's the challenge at a societal level that we're having right now is connection. I think COVID put all that on steroids. Yeah. And so you know how to make the world crazy is isolate people for an extended period of time. And that's exactly what's going on. That's why we're having all this difficulty in around the world right now is because we've all been isolated for a couple of years and we're social creatures. We have to spend time with each other or we start isolating and developing mental health issues and substance abuse issues and that's what's going on.
I think we're living in a counterfeit society in some ways too. You know, counterfeits are coming up and trying to replace the authentic thing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, here as a organizational leader, sometimes I talk to my other leaders and I say, hey, can you call so-and-so and check in, see how things are going? And inevitably, you know, they'll say, hey, yeah, boss, I called it, you know, I checked in on so-and-so. I had a conversation. Oh, that's nice. You talked to him. You talked to him? You picked up the phone? Oh, you wanted me to actually pick up the phone and talk to him? Yeah. That's not the real thing. But there's so much of that comes into our world now, where it's a reasonable facsimile. How's that for the real thing? And that reasonable facsimile, time and time again, does not measure up. Yeah. Right. So
it doesn't quench the thirst that Brian mentioned earlier.
That's right. No.
When he felt that true compassion care.
That's right.
He said it was like being lost in a desert and having that water. We know the real thing, right?
Yeah.
When we have it, when it's not available, we get used to the artificial. We think that's all there is. Yeah. There's more.
Yeah.
And it is a trying time and a challenging time. And there's some generational differences. You know, all these young people, and I have grandkids and kids that are grown. They grew up with the devices in their hands, and they grew up with, you know, the texting and messaging and all the different ways that they can communicate. And that seems like, right, the way to do it. But people do know when they experience the real thing.
In some ways, they just don't know any better, though, too, right? Can we say that too? Like that's why we got graybeards like us trying to get the word out there on the power of human connection.
Yeah.
Just so we can share with the audience, guys, I'm going to ask you to be like real right now. When we started out this conversation compared to how you feel right now, what's the difference?
Oh my goodness.
Come on.
Well, I forgot
just right here.
I forgot I was being, you know, recorded.
Right.
Because I'm just here in the in this conversation, which is, I think, is a profound conversation, a challenging one, a good one.
Yeah.
I feel both energized and grounded right now, just talking and hearing each of you share and being challenged by that, but also just feeling like I'm in the company of goodness.
Yeah.
And I think, to have the good life, we all are seeking a good life. We need good experiences and good people.
That's right.
There's no substitute for that, right?
That's right.
Stuff does not substitute
That's right.
the exchange that we're having. So I feel at peace. I feel encouraged. I feel pretty happy, actually,
Yeah.
Brian.
Yeah. What about you, Brian? Convey it to the audience, like just because we're actually eating of this thing that we're talking about right now, right?
Well, the way I felt before is, man, I just wanted to take a nap.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And now how I feel is,
Oh, we lost him.
Right when he was going to tell us how he feels.
Yeah, how he feels. Brian, you're back on the podcast only by
But you're
the
here.
virtue of this thing we were saying, reasonable
Yeah,
facsimile.
it came in handy, though.
Here we are. So, so tell us again, like, how'd you feel before we got connected, and how you feeling now? Tell the audience, please.
well, before, I was super exhausted. I just wanted to lay down and take a nap.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a long day,
Yeah.
and so I was somewhat like, oh, this podcast, and but now I'm just like Dean said, I'm very energized. I'm ready to go out and do something at this point.
Yeah, that's
because
awesome.
the conversation it's nourished.
Yeah.
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 To me, it's I think a lot about this is it's energy. Is we're sharing positive energy with.
That's right. That's right.
So I really appreciate it, and I also feel very grateful. Grateful to be able to talk about this, and thank you for inviting us on.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both for coming and sharing your story. I'd like to ask each of you in closing, if somebody were wanting to reach out to you on the internet and find out more about you, and maybe try to get more insight as to each of you as to where you are today. Is there anything you'd like to share? Website, something of that nature?
Sure. Easy to find on LinkedIn, Dean Fitch.
Okay, beautiful.
So please reach out if you want to just have a chat or a connection or conversation or share a story. I'm totally available.
Yeah. And Brian, how about you? And you could feel free to share your website of your facility too, please.
I'm with the Arbor. It's thearbor.com. It's a treatment center outside of Austin, Texas. And email address is bsamford@thearbor.com.
Excellent.
Hey, you know what? That makes sense. I'm going to do that too. Dean.fitch@kipuhealth.com. KIPU health.com.
Yeah. And I just want to thank you both, and also share with the audience that these are both, gifted healers, masterful in their craft, and what they've shared with us today is very rich and meaningful. So thank you guys.
Thanks for having us, Michael. This is awesome.
Thank you.
Wow, what a powerful story of transformation and trust from Dean and Brian's story. I think there's so much we can learn from this. But one thing that I really want to highlight is a piece toward the beginning of the conversation, talking about love.
The word love is almost taboo in some places.
We shouldn't think that's unconventional to hear
Yeah.
a seasoned, well-educated
Right.
clinician use the word love,
Right.
because we've been trained to have professional distance.
That's right.
Which doesn't mean that we don't love, but we certainly don't talk about it
No.
historically in our field. And I heard Brian present several years back in Dallas, Texas, to a group of professionals, and he shared this sentiment, and he got a chance to unpack it a bit more, and the room melted.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Altered Life. Please subscribe and leave a comment below. And we'll see you next time. But for now, go and live an altered life.